Theodore Robert Bundy was an American serial killer who kidnapped, raped, and murdered numerous young women and girls during the 1970s and possibly earlier. After more than a decade of denials, he confessed to 30 murders committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. His true victim total is unknown and likely significantly higher. Bundy was often regarded as charismatic and handsome, traits he exploited to win the trust of both his victims and society as a whole. He typically approached women in public places, either asking for help by feigning a physical impairment such as an injury or impersonating an authority figure. Once tricked into being led away, they would be bludgeoned unconscious and taken elsewhere to be sexually assaulted and killed. Bundy frequently revisited the bodies of those he abducted, grooming and performing sex acts on the corpses until decomposition and destruction by wild animals made any further interactions impossible. At least 12 of his victims were decapitated and their severed heads kept as mementos in his apartment. On a few occasions, he broke into homes at night and bludgeoned his victims as they slept. In 1975, Bundy was arrested and jailed in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault. He then became a suspect in a progressively longer list of unsolved homicides in several states. Facing murder charges in Colorado, Bundy engineered 2 dramatic escapes and committed further assaults in Florida, including 3 murders, before his ultimate recapture in 1978. For the Florida homicides, he received 3 death sentences in 2 trials. Bundy was executed at Florida State Prison in Ryford on January 24, 1989. Biographer Ann Rule characterized him as a sadistic sociopath who took pleasure from another human's pain and the control he had over his victims, to the point of death and even after. Bundy once described himself as the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet, a statement with which attorney Polly Nelson, a member of his last defense team, agreed. Ted, she wrote, was the very definition of heartless evil. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24, 1946, to Eleanor Louise Cowell at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers in Burlington, Vermont. His biological father's identity has never been confirmed. His original birth certificate apparently assigns paternity to a salesman and United States Air Force veteran named Lloyd Marshall, though a copy of it listed his father as unknown. Louise claims she met a war veteran named Jack Worthington, who abandoned her soon after she became pregnant. Census records reveal that several men by the name of John Worthington and Lloyd Marshall lived near Louise when Bundy was conceived. Some family members expressed suspicions that Bundy might have been fathered by Louise's own father. In the 2020 documentary film Crazy, Not Insane, psychiatrist Dorothy Otno-Lewis claimed she received a sample of Bundy's blood, though she did not specify from where, and had arranged a DNA test which confirmed that Bundy was not the product of incest. For the first 3 years of his life, Bundy lived in the Philadelphia home of his maternal grandparents, Samuel Necht Cowell and Eleanor Miriam Cowell nee Longstreet, who raised him as their son to avoid the social stigma that accompanied birth outside of wedlock at that time. Family, friends, and even young Ted were told that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his older sister. Bundy eventually discovered the truth, although his recollections of the circumstances varied. He told a girlfriend that a cousin showed him a copy of his birth certificate after calling him a bastard, but he told biographers Stephen Michaud and Hugh Inesworth that he had found the certificate himself. Biographer and true crime writer Ann Rule, who knew Bundy personally, wrote that he did not find out until 1969, when he located his original birth record in Vermont. Bundy expressed a lifelong resentment toward his mother for never talking to him about his real father, and for leaving him to discover his true parentage for himself. Bundy occasionally exhibited disturbing behavior at an early age. Louise's younger sister Julia recalled awakening from a nap to find herself surrounded by knives from the kitchen, and 3-year-old Ted standing by the bed, smiling. Bundy's childhood neighbor Sandy Holt described him as a bully, saying, "He liked to terrify people. He liked to be in charge. He liked to inflict pain and suffering and fear." In some interviews, Bundy spoke warmly of his grandparents and told Rule that he identified with, respected, and clung to his grandfather. In 1987, however, he and other family members told attorneys that Samuel was a tyrannical bully who beat his wife and dog, exhibited bigotry, and swung neighborhood cats by their tails. In one instance, Samuel threw Julia down a flight of stairs for oversleeping. He sometimes spoke aloud to unseen presences, and at least once flew into a violent rage when the question of Bundy's paternity was raised. Bundy described his grandmother as a timid and obedient woman who periodically underwent electroconvulsive therapy for depression and feared to leave their house toward the end of her life. These descriptions of Bundy's grandparents have been questioned in more recent investigations. Some locals remembered Cowell as a fine man, if a bit eccentric. A cousin of Bundy claimed that the negative characterizations of Cowell likely arose to explain why his grandson became a serial killer. In addition, Louise's sister Audrey stated that their mother could not leave her home because she suffered a stroke due to being overweight and was not mentally ill. In 1950, Louise changed her surname from Cowell to Nelson and, at the urging of multiple family members, left Philadelphia with Ted to live with cousins Alan and Jane Scott in Tacoma, Washington. In 1951, she met Johnny Culpeper Bundy, a hospital cook, at an adult singles night at Tacoma's First Methodist Church. They married later that year and Johnny formally adopted Ted. Johnny and Louise conceived 4 children together, and though Johnny tried to include his adopted son in camping trips and other family activities, Ted remained distant from him. He would later complain to a girlfriend that Johnny was not his real father, wasn't very bright, and didn't make much money. Bundy varied his recollections of Tacoma in later years. To Michaud and Ainsworth, he described roaming his neighborhood, picking through trash barrels in search of pictures of naked women, and to attorney and author Polly Nelson he said that he perused detective magazines, crime novels, and true crime documentaries for stories that involved sexual violence, particularly when the stories were illustrated with pictures of dead or maimed women. In a letter to Rule, however, he asserted that he never, ever read fact detective magazines, and shuddered at the thought that anyone would. He told Michaud that he would consume large quantities of alcohol and canvass the community late at night in search of undraped windows where he could observe women undressing, or whatever could be seen. Accounts of Bundy's social life also varied. He told journalists Michaud and Ainsworth that he chose to be alone as an adolescent because he was unable to understand interpersonal relationships. He claimed that he had no natural sense of how to develop friendships. "I didn't know what made people want to be friends," Bundy said. "I didn't know what underlay social interactions." Classmates from Woodrow Wilson High School, however, told Rule that Bundy was well known and well liked there, a medium-sized fish in a large pond. Bundy's only significant athletic avocation was downhill skiing, which he pursued enthusiastically with stolen equipment and forged lift tickets. During high school, he was arrested at least twice on suspicion of burglary and motor vehicle theft. When he reached age 18, the details of the incidents were expunged from his record, as is customary in Washington and many other states.